we're looking at this to be equitable, not equal, right? It's not like you do this, so I do that. And then I have freedom here, so you have freedom there. It's like, how do we make sure that this is enjoyable for both of us so that there's equitability in the pursuit of E&M that is comfortable for both of us, the way our brains work, the way our bodies work, what we need placed around us for this to be sexually relevant and a turn on in our brains.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from all over the world to hear their personal journeys of self-discovery through the lenses of love, sex, and relationships.
Our mission is to show people that they're not alone and to inspire them to embrace their true selves so that together we can open minds and live authentically without shame.
We believe everyone's story is powerful and beautiful, yet it's important to remember that everyone does life a little bit differently and that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we aren't doctors. Please consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Hi, and welcome to Ask Us Anything, where we answer questions from our community members. Today, we have some really great community questions. I'm excited about it. My name is Meshai, and I'm here with Fin, and we're going to spend about an hour with you all today.
Yeah, it's going to be, we got good questions. I'm excited for these two and excited to be here with you, Meshai, doing this every month. And before we jump in, we're going to talk a little bit about some changes to what we're doing because we're changing it up a little bit on our end. But before we do, just for anybody who's joining us for the first time, maybe a quick bit about who Meshai and I are and what makes us qualified in some sense to have opinions. To have opinions. Meshai, what qualifications are you bringing to the table today?
Okay. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am also certified in trauma therapy, and I'm certified in sex therapy. I have also been walking my own personal E&M journey for about 6 years now. And what I get to do is I get to take all of those skills and those hard-won lessons, and I take them and I bring them into my coaching practice. I'm with Expansive Connection, and I'm one of the coaches there. And so we get to do a lot of work within the community. And that kind of makes me just a little bit qualified. What about you?
Yeah, a little bit less. But also I wanted to note, when we started this, you used to say you've been walking your own path for 5 years. Yeah. And that was 17 months ago that we've been doing
my gosh.
So you've graduated to year 6.
I've graduated.
On my side, a lot more maybe years of practicing. Yes. So I've been open in a non-monogamous partnership with Emma, who normally hosts this podcast every week with me, since like 2007. So coming up on 20 years of doing this. Nice. And it's looked a lot of different ways, from swinging, friends with benefits, polyamorous, quads, and deep connections, to kind of just figuring it out. And I don't know, we've gone through the recalibration phase a few times. And so a lot of my experience is sort of anecdotal, or my qualifications are anecdotal and experiential. But I also went through a 18-month to 2-year coaching program for sex and relationships. So not that I graduated with a certificate that says I'm qualified, but I learned a lot about myself through that time, and a lot of really interesting things that I like to bring into the conversation. So that's a little bit about my qualifications for being.
Brilliant things, not to mention all those man hours on air of people sharing their stories and you guys going back and forth, and that is amazing. So
yeah, well, thank you.
I think you're a little more than qualified
to have opinions, right? And nowhere along this way do we say these are the right way or the answers.
No,
just sort of our musings and thoughts on these. And and before we jump into the first question, just a couple of little updates on our end around how we're going to be doing the Ask Us Anythings moving forward. Yeah. So we've done, this is number 17. We've done 17 months in a row, and we're going to sort of, it's pretty amazing.
Right? Yeah. I'm excited. That is an accomplishment. I love the fact that we can say we've put that much time into it.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we're not going anywhere in the sense that we're still going to do these, but we're going to do them a little more sporadically. We don't get as many questions as we thought we would. I think when we
This is true.
started this,
Mhm.
almost 18 months ago, there was this dream. I know I'm a big dreamer, and I was like, okay, we're going to do a couple, and the questions are just going to come rolling in, and they haven't. They've come
Yeah.
trickling in here and there, and we go out into our community, and we're like, hey, everybody, we need questions. Send us questions, and so we get enough questions to keep us going. But we're going to sort of relax on that a little bit. We're not going to try to force one of these every month. But
Mhm.
if you have questions and thoughts, we'd
Yeah, please still
still
send them
love for
in.
you to send them to us. Yeah. Yeah. Send them our way. And we'll just sort of do these periodically, sporadically when it
Mhm.
makes sense.
Mhm.
When we can get together. I mean, we've also got shifting schedules and stuff on both of our sides that are making this tougher. So we're not going anywhere. We're still here, but we're just going to be a little less rigidly consistent.
I like that terminology. Yes, I agree. So, if you're looking for them, they will be here. But it'll probably be like maybe a month or two in between when we do a recording, and that's on the contingency of us having questions from the community because we want to make sure that
Yep.
we're always answering questions that are kind of like maybe a little different than what we've done before. We don't want to repeat a lot, but we do also want to make sure that it's relevant to what everybody is kind of curious about. So, we're willing to wait for that.
Totally. Yeah, and we didn't, we even talked about like, do we make up our own questions? But
Mhm.
like that doesn't really feel right either. Like we want these to be from you, for you, and and about things that we don't normally think about because we spend too much time thinking about this stuff anyways. So we don't need to make up our own our own questions. Um, so that's just a little update on our end of where we're at. And we're excited to keep coming back and doing this and to keep getting more questions from all of you as they come to you.
Awesome. Okay.
All right. Well, enough business. How about our first question?
Yeah.
So our first question today is has to do with metamors, and we thought we'd start by just sort of defining what a metamor is for anybody who's not familiar with a metamor. So metamors are your partner's partners. So Michelle, if you and I are in a relationship and you go out and get a new partner, your new partner would be my metamor. And depending on the dynamic, you would be considered the hinge of our sort of relationship where especially if me and your other partner, my metamor, aren't in a
Mhm.
relationship together, you're really the
Mhm.
connector. You would be considered the hinge, and so those are just a couple of terms that are going to be part of this conversation. So we just wanted to make
I
that
like that.
clear.
Awesome.
So the question is, what do you recommend when you have two metamors who want absolutely nothing to do with each other? One is monogamous, one is non monogamous. And as the hinge in this situation, how do I manage all of that?
That's a good question.
Well, good thing you're the hinge and you have all the answers.
I have all of the answers. No, I think sometimes being a hinge can be really difficult. Like, I like to think of it as like the V, like you're at the bottom of the V and your partners are at the top.
Yep.
And I think to me, when I thought about this question, it broke down into three things. So for me, it was like considerations around time, considerations around emotional capacity, and what's important to everyone. Like, what are like the sacred moments? What's really special? And then making sure that when you think about those three things, that you're also including all three of you. So like, what does one partner like? What does the other partner like? And then also, what do you like? Right, as far as your time, your emotional capacity, and
Right.
what's important to you as far as it's concerned in each relationship.
Which is why you started up by saying this can be a lot to manage. I mean, you're not just what am I needing, but what am I needing? What is everybody needing, and how do
Hmm.
they all interact? It's a lot to keep track of
It is. It is.
and not lose yourself in
Mm-hmm.
it too.
Especially if like one of them is, especially if you're the primary partner to one, and not necessarily the primary and only partner to the other, because that's two different roles you're having to inhabit, and so you kind of have to be a whole relationship in a sense to one partner, and then there's other parts for the person that is also dating other people where maybe someone else like your metamor, then if you're the hinge person, your metamors are helping to fulfill certain aspects of that relationship where you don't have that with the one that's kind of monogamous with just you.
Mhm.
So those needs and those different relationship structures will be vastly different.
Yeah, I think that's not something to be overlooked, right? Is the whole one is monogamous, one is
Hmm.
non-monogamous. You know, you are in many ways, even if you don't necessarily want to define yourself in the primary type,
Yeah.
labels, you are when you're somebody's only relationship outside of themselves, that is a different level of, I guess,
Hmm.
commitment. I don't know, maybe not even commitment. It's just a different level of they have a lot.
It's like expectations.
Yeah, yeah, or they have just a lot more maybe that they're able to bring, or
Okay.
they're not sort of
Hmm.
spreading out their relational sort of needs and wants and energy. Their relational energy is like
Hmm.
focused on you, and if you're spreading yours out, like there's a mismatch there and sort of the energy, or there
Mm.
can be. I don't think there always is, but there can be.
Yeah, and being able to recognize that, like, sometimes it won't feel equal. And so just making sure that, like, you guys talk about how your energy resources and time resources, might look different, in the relationship for everyone, because you also have to have your own inner reserve. And so
For sure.
that has to be taken into account as well.
Yeah.
Then I was thinking also about, like, especially if, like, the metamors don't want anything to do with each other, like, that it's okay that they don't like each other, right? They don't have to like each other, they don't have to wanna hang out. However, it's really important that the metamors, have a conversation with you about how they want to support the other relationship, right? You don't have to be with the other person like happy-go-lucky. However, the supporting of that other relationship does need to be talked about and has to work for everyone, kind of.
Yeah, which is an interesting piece because and I know I would even venture as far as to say you don't even have to support it in
Mhm.
theory, right? You can be like, I don't actually think this is a great partnership for you. It makes me, you can have all of
Yeah.
those feelings. But if you're going to opt into being in a partnership with somebody, then then you do have to figure out how you're going to support one another as they do things. Again, even if you maybe don't support it in the like, I think this is good for you, but I want to be with you and I want to support you. That is a tricky place to be, or it can be a really tricky
Mhm,
place to
mhm.
be.
Yeah, I guess so also trying to figure out what support means for you.
Yeah.
Like, what parts of that are super important? And then, what parts of the relationship are you like, "I don't want to manage this part. This part is hard." Like, being honest with yourself about that as well, and taking a break every now and then. I think sometimes managing multiple relationships can sometimes feel like overwhelm or burnout, so making sure that you're really taking good care of yourself as well. That's all. That's what I was thinking about it. Oh, and then, I think for some people, when they get into the metamor, like, they don't like each other thing, trying to figure out from the beginning when you are dating other people how important it is for your metamors to get along. Like, does that even matter to you? Because that might weigh in on who you choose to start a relationship with.
Yeah, I love that you said that. That is where some of my notes picked up or kicked in, was around sort of this idea. This isn't the I guess I'm sometimes the person who comes along and says, "Well, maybe you should have thought of this beforehand," and I don't want it to come off that way because there are times where we get in, and I'm just as much as anybody get into stuff and then realize, "Oh boy, this
Mm,
isn't what I
mhm,
was expecting." But my thoughts would be if you're looking into non-monogamy and going down these types of paths, to really think about some of these things before you jump in. And just like you said, right, I'm interested in two people. What type of non-monogamy are they interested in? What do they need? If one of them is like, I'm diehard kitchen table poly, I'll only be with people if I can know all of their partners and be friends with all of their partners, and we need to be one big happy family who can all sit around and do holidays together. And the other person's like, I like a lot of separation. I'm really busy. I don't have time for that. And I actually get really uncomfortable around your other partners. So I need a lot more sort of parallel dynamics and separation. Neither one of those is wrong. But if you're the hinge between that, that's a lot of difference to manage. That's a lot of people probably going to be feeling like they're not doing it my way and it
mhm,
doesn't feel good. And you're the middle person trying to bridge like a huge delta between people's needs. So I think understanding some of these needs before we jump into these situations and deciding like, this person might be incredible and this person might be incredible, but if we mix the three of us together, it's going to be really tough, because of just people's wants and needs and their own sort of desires around this. So I think, mm, my thoughts on this are, as much as you can, understand that this is going to be not super
Mm.
easy, and understand what you're getting into before you jump into it.
And also, like, sometimes you don't know till you're in it. So that's also a thing. So if you're already in and
Yep.
you're like,
Totally.
"I want to backpedal," like, don't feel bad. I think that exists for a lot of people,
Hmm. Yeah.
but I think it's really important for you to be honest with yourself about your time and energy resources, and then being really honest with your metamors or with the metamors about how you being a hinge looks different than them being the metamors. Like you're both having a different perspective. Like you're trying to engage with two different people where they are
Hmm.
looking both towards you and you're looking at two different people at the same time. So it's just a different vantage point. So asking them to be like gracious and give you the benefit of the doubt a little more often than not, just to make sure that there's less ruptures. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, which I had another note that seems to be right in line with this, which is I think you as a hinge, I mean, I think as the hinge in any dynamic and in life, it's really important to have sort of clear and strong boundaries for yourself and understand yourself. But I think in these situations, particularly, right, you're going to have a lot of times where you're going to be getting information from two different people, and what do you do with that information? How do you manage it? How do you manage your own emotions around it without it spilling over into the other ones? Again, not that it's going to be these perfect containers, but if that's what some of what one or both of your metamors are, or not metamors, what one or
Mhm.
both of your partners are wanting and needing, like understanding that you're going to need to really be on top of some of that, on top of the communication, on top of your boundaries, what's yours and what isn't. And also that your metamors, or the metamors, your two partners, also have to step up and do some of this work, and they can't just shovel it onto you and be like, hey, you're the hinge, make sure I don't ever feel any
Yeah.
discomfort. They're opting into this as adults as well, so if they're opting in and you're opting in, it's really, I think, on everybody to be able to manage the ecosystem rather than it to all fall on the hinge person.
Ooh, I love that. That actually might land a lot better with people instead of it being like, how do you support the relationship? It could be like, how are we supporting the ecosystem? That sounds really lovely. I like that.
Yeah, which is not always easy to do, right? Especially if you don't want anything to do with your metamor. And you said earlier too that like there's a chance, right? You might get into this and then think you're going to do it this way and then
Mhm.
have to backpedal. And there could also be, right, you get into a situation and whatever, for a while you and your metamor are like
Mhm.
best friends, and then maybe
Yeah.
there's a rupture. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I don't want anything to do with that person. And now you go from, wow, this was one way, to now it's something totally different. So there's all sorts of reasons you could wind up here. And also why my whole know before you jump in is not always valid in every situation, because people might not know
Yeah.
this out of the gate.
And you might actually start off, like you said, liking your metamor, and then you have that rupture, and then you're like, I've seen a side of you that I'm not okay with. And now I want to take a step back, which is fine, but it does change the dynamic of how changes the ecosystem. It does. And so, you know, I think those conversations are necessary to have. But it's also really hard because there's probably a little bit of grief in that if there was a different expectation than what you have currently. And so making sure that you
Yeah.
give yourself space for those like grief emotions or the sadness that it's so separate and that it creates a different set of challenges than if everybody's kind of a little happier to be around each other.
Right. Right. And I think, maybe just a last
Mhm.
thought, at least from my side, it would just be, to the metamors out there as well. You don't have to be
Nope.
best friends with your partners. You don't have to be in these kitchen table dynamics. you can have your own limitations, your own capacities. And that doesn't mean you have to like hate the other person, right? You can have a very loving feeling towards somebody and be like, they're amazing. I just don't have the time or the energy to invest, but I'm fully in support of what you're doing. I just don't want to be grabbing a beer with you, every week and feel like we're building, like I just don't have that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. Right. So I'm just trying to give a little bit of leeway and permission to everybody in this dynamic to be like, what do you need to be in this ecosystem? And how are you going to take care of yourself, and know that there isn't a right way to be a metamor and there isn't a right way to be a hinge in these situations.
I like that. That was very gracefully said. That was nice.
Wow. Practice, practice, practice.
Okay, so that's all I had on that.
That's all you had on that one? Okay, well, maybe we move our way into the next one.
Okay, perfect.
What are some ways you both would recommend for a couple that each of the partners have very different expressions of their sexuality in terms of their sexual appetite, in terms of how often they each want to have sex, how often they each think about sex, how often they each had experiences with sex or want to experience sex, how to maintain connection when there isn't as much alignment within the non-monogamy experiences of how sexual both partners want to be, particularly if one is more of a voyeur, one is more of a participant, or one is more sensual, one is more sexual, one is more into role play and fantasy, or one is more into like just, get into business right out of the gate. Just curious, when there's different dynamics at play with different people's expressions of sexuality, how to bridge those so that each of the partners are getting their needs fulfilled and desires fulfilled with each other and with other people within the non-monogamy world. Thank you.
All right, Meshai. This is
Yeah,
a big
this
one.
one's
This
got a
one's
couple layers.
deep. A couple of layers. This is like a 46 layer cake. And each layer can simultaneously be delicious and really
Yes.
challenging.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I think this is actually one of those questions that I find a lot with in different forms with people when I do coaching with them, is the differences in your expressions of sexuality and also in your pace. And so when I was trying to like think about the opinions that I had about this question, one of the ways I could like compartmentalize it in my brain was like when you have a couple or one person in the couple is into BDSM and the other one is like, I like handcuffs. That's about it, you know? Or you have someone who is really sensual and needs a connection and a friendship before they can get aroused, where the other person in the couple is like, I'm not picky and I'm ready to go. you know, those can be very, very different
Mhm.
spaces to engage in sexually together and even separately, because you might have some like judgments or thoughts around like, really? Like, that's all you needed? Or the person being like, it's taking you this long, like, do you like the person or do you not like the person? And so just recognizing that those different types of expressions of sexuality and the needs that each partner has might be very, very different. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of like, how does each person support the other partner in their expression of sexuality? Like, how do you come alongside that to support it? Supporting it might be letting that person play with other people who are interested in that. Like if they're doing BDSM and they're into flogging and you're not into flogging, like how do I, if I'm open to it, support you engaging with people who might enjoy that activity? Or if you're, someone who needs a little more sensuality and friendship before you play with other people, how do we make sure that that happens so that when I'm ready to go, you might also kind of be ready to go. And so I think it kind of gives a head nod to the brake and accelerator kind of wording that was in the book Come As You Are, where, you know,
Hmm. Emily
Emily,
Nagoski,
yes.
for anybody who's
Thank
not
you.
familiar. Yeah.
So just making sure that you're talking a little bit about like if the person has a stickier break when it comes to sexual or sensual engagement, that you're able to like help them down regulate so that they can be in a calmer place to allow that break to come off a little bit easier. And then the same thing for the person who has maybe a different type of sensuality or more heightened sensuality. So basically, their accelerator is like ready to go. That you know they remember that there's other ways to express that sensuality and sexual energy beyond just like BDSM or beyond just like ready to go. Like, how else could you express that? So that you can start to build a bridge where you both stay on the bridge together, even if you're not right beside each other, but you're on the same bridge. Yeah, that's what I was thinking anyway. That's what like came to mind. What about you?
Yeah. No, I love everything you said in there. And maybe just a few, I have a lot of thoughts on this one, so I'll try not to like go on and on and on, but I'll start with just a few thoughts that come to mind right away, which is just this damn societal pressure that I think we all get heaped onto us from very early, which is some variation of, to love means to like be the same as, or to do the same things, or to be into the same things as our partners. And so it can be really scary when one of you is like, I love the color blue, and the other one's like, I
Mm,
love red, and you're like, oh God, what does that mean about me? And that I love blue and they love red. What does that mean about us? What is right? And so this question is about sex and intimacy, which I think are some of the like scariest places where this can show up for a lot of us. But it's like a really, to me, it's a bigger picture situation that we run into, which is we're different, and how do we bridge the differences in who we are while remaining in connection in a partnership. So that was like, to me, the umbrella question here was really
mm,
that,
mhm,
in many ways. And I loved what you said about or just like touching on the gas and brake piece, and and maybe for anybody who's not really familiar with this model, Emily Nagoski talks about it in her book quite a bit. But the sort of the general quick version of it is, right, there's sort of, I'm just going to very much simplify, but like, let's say my goal is to get to like 50 miles an hour. And so I can either do that by like putting the gas pedal down, halfway and slowly getting to 50 miles an hour. But if I'm also riding the brake, I'm going to have to like push the gas a lot harder
yeah.
to get to 50. Right. And so the idea of gas and brakes are there are certain things in our world that are like turn ons and get us revved up and get us energized. And those would be our gas. But there are also things that are at the same time telling us like, no, that's not okay, right? So maybe it's, oh wow, I just saw a person walk by in an outfit that I was like, wow, that's amazing and super sexy, and I start to get turned on and excited, not necessarily turned on, but I just start to get excited, and then the shame comes in and is like, oh, but all of these stories, and now your brakes are just like hammering. So you went from like, oh, I was gonna maybe get a little excited and interested in this thing, to it's
Mhm,
gone,
mhm,
because the brakes come in and sort of cool it down. And so that's, again, a very simplified and sort of my own rewording of gas and brakes. But I think just understanding that all of us have the gas and all of us have the brakes in us, and and that those show up in different ways around different desires in our sexuality and our relationship. So I love that you brought that in. I think it's a really great thing to understand more about, for each of us to figure out for ourselves what are our gases and what are our brakes, so that we can come and have great conversations with our partners about what that means, so we can say, here's what I need to feel safe in a sexual or intimate environment, so my brake pedal's not on the floor, and we're trying to find ways or I'm trying to find ways to get turned on and into this while my brakes are completely locked up. and keeping me from moving.
I love that because it's also like it kind of removes the personalization and the space for blame or like I'm not good enough out of it. And it takes the focus more and places it more on like, this is just the way my body works. This is the way my brain works. And then how do we try to get as compatible or parallel in our desires and wants as we possibly can?
Yeah, and one of the things, again, not to just sit and rehash everything Emily Nagoski talks about, but one of the things she does talk about in there is the mismatch in libido sometimes can be a product of really just lots of breaks getting in the way. And if you can figure out for yourself how to create a level of safety and comfort that those breaks start to go away. I mean, we've talked to people where they came into their partnership and it seemed like, oh, this person is the gas and this person is the brakes. And once they were able to find
Mhm.
safety, all of a
Yeah.
sudden the
Yeah.
brakes became the gas. And the other person's like, who the fuck is this person? And what is happening? Because it
Mhm.
wasn't even like, oh, I don't have libido. It was, I
Yep.
didn't feel safe. I
Yeah.
didn't feel comfortable. I wasn't okay here. And now that I am,
Yeah.
look out. Cause now it's
Mhm,
going to get
mhm.
fun.
No, that happens quite a bit, where people are like, I I felt like I was being dragged into this," and their partner's like, "I just want you to loosen up," and once they get their sea legs underneath them, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I love this," and it's like a Sound
Right.
of Music
Yeah. It's
moment.
that finding. Yeah. Right. Right. A few other thoughts that I had too on this. One, just generally, I think ties into all of this is reframing the mission to like how do we get better sex and more sex and but how do we find pleasure? How do we find mutual pleasure? What is pleasurable and fun, right? How can we make this about this activity being a good time rather than, well, I need to do this activity or more of this activity means a better relationship, but rather how do we find pleasure together and what does that look like and how do we create safety for that? Because yeah, I think that the sort of the way she described Emily Nagoski talks about a bit is like nobody wants to have sex that isn't fun and doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
So the goal is fun, pleasure,
Mhm,
enjoyment together and the sex will
mhm,
sort of
mhm.
follow if that's what is fun and pleasurable for the two of you or for the however many of you there are.
Absolutely. So thank you for breaking down the gas and the break wording that she is. I think that's so important as far as recognize like making it normal and also giving language to the things that we experience and also just normalizing that there's a lot of people who have a harder time making that kind of connection between different paces in this journey and different desires or even different starting points. Like some people just walk into sensual places and they're like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah,
And then other people walk into sensual places and get overwhelmed and have to figure out a way to get
yeah.
into their bodies. And then they're ready to go. But that's a different process than someone who's like, the context is sexually relevant and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and maybe they have fewer
Mhm.
breaks, right? Back to that, metaphor, they have fewer breaks getting in their way for whatever reason in that situation. But maybe you put that same person who's like comfortable walking into a 20-person orgy where everyone's just having a
Mhm.
free for all and they're like, great, I'm into it. And you have that person walk into an intimacy workshop where people are talking about their feelings and their emotions and they're like, whoa, boy, nah, I can't
Mhm.
get there
Mhm.
here. Right. And so it's not that one's right and one's wrong. It's just that we all bring our own
Yeah.
stuff to every
Yeah.
situation we go to. Yeah.
Um, the only other thing that I can think of that I wanted to make sure that I pointed out was, like, to give yourself grace when it comes to these different, starting points and desirable turn-ons and turn-offs and having, like, a different expression of sexuality is that what you're going towards, which is kind of what you talked about, Finn, with, like, looking at it from a like how do we create pleasure together stance is that we're looking at this to be equitable, not equal. right? It's not like you do this, so I do that. And then I have freedom here, so you have freedom there. It's like, how do we make sure that this is enjoyable for both of us so that there's equitability in the pursuit of E&M that is comfortable for both of us, the way our brains work, the way our bodies work, what we need placed around us for this to be sexually relevant and a turn on in our brains, and then go from there, because the sameness is probably the enemy to the pleasure, because we're different people.
Yeah, trying to make it the
Mhm.
same, right? Like, yeah, that's gonna in many ways actually drive us further apart.
Yeah.
I have at least some of my own experience and having talked to a lot of people who've come up against this, and I love that you said that, Michelle, because there was a piece in here that I wanted to weave in, which is around. I mean, I'm going to bring it in
Mhm.
around shame, but I think there's a lot of different things that can sit here that are the thing that makes this hard, right? When if you bring something to the table, example, let's say you you bring it to your partner like, hey, I'm really interested in learning about shibari and rope bondage and the art of tying and all of that, and your partner's like, sure, it'd be great if they were like, "Oh yeah, me too. That's amazing." But there's also a chance that it hits something for them of, "Oh, I'm not into that. What does that say about me? What am I? What's wrong with me?" There can be a quick, I think, for a lot of us around sex and intimacy. There's so much that gets heaped on us our whole lives, and then when somebody brings something different, it can be really easy, I'll say, at least for myself, to go to a place of, they like this, I'm not as excited, there's something wrong with me. And and then if I react in a way that's like, oh yeah, 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 no, that shibari sounds fun. Yeah, we could. Okay, right? You're picking up on like, well, whoa,
Mhm.
well, what's wrong
Mhm.
with me? Like you don't actually seem that excited. You're trying, but so now both people are a bit in this like, what's wrong with
Mhm.
me mode, rather than how can this be
Mhm. Mhm.
exciting? And so I think it's not to say like don't bring your shame. It's just understanding that it's there, understanding that as much as we want to be the awesome sex positive people, the most sex positive people that
Mhm.
ever existed, that's not necessarily always accessible. And when you have mismatches, there's grief in that in a relationship. There's grief in like, oh, I thought my partner and I we're going to be best friends and we were going to go on all these adventures. We were going to do all these crazy, cool sexual things together, and we don't seem to align on very many of them. Like that's a place of for
Yeah.
grieving of
Yeah.
like, oh shit, this isn't what I
Mhm.
dreamed it was going to be.
Oh my gosh, that's a whole podcast by
Oh,
itself, like, what happens when it's not the
yeah.
dream that you thought it would be, and you get something else? Oh, okay, okay. Yeah.
Yep. Yep, spot for sure. And then you mix into this, back to our Shibari example, same situation. You're super excited about it. I'm a little bit like, okay, yeah, I mean, let's figure it out. And maybe we even get to a place where we fight through all of that, and we had a great conversation about what was getting in our ways, and we go out and we start to, get our first rope and get a book and watch some videos and go to a workshop, and we're like muddling through this thing together. And then you go out and you're at an event and you meet the most amazing
Mhm.
shibari wizard that's ever shibaried.
That's ever shibaried.
And you're like, oh, I'm so excited. I met this person. We're gonna, and all of a sudden it's like, oh shit. I was trying to
Mhm.
get on board and now you've got the
Yeah.
person for it. And like that adds a new level of like, huh, that's a tough
Mhm.
one to swallow.
Yeah, there's some jealousy and fears of being replacement, and then also guilt sometimes because you feel relieved that you don't have to do it, but then you're like, "Are they gonna like them more because 'cause they're engaging in their new favorite thing?" I think all that exists there. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So those are, I don't know, those
Mhm.
are some of the thoughts I had in there around this just being, it's, I think it simultaneously really can be challenging and scary and full of grief and shame, but as I think when it's also an opportunity to come through those things or work through those things or work on those things, not that I don't think you can ever really get to quote unquote the other side, but these are amazing opportunities for connection and healing with our partners to say, okay, we we both just triggered the shit out of each other because of shame or
Mm-hmm.
something. How can I see you better and deeper? How can you see me better and deeper? And then we've built something stronger than we had beforehand, even if we don't quote unquote
Yeah.
solve it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. True. Because you cannot meet all of your partner's needs, and there's some parts that are just going to not be accessible to your abilities like someone else's might be. And I think sometimes acknowledging that, which I want to validate, sometimes comes with a little bit of sadness, maybe envy, maybe jealousy, and
Mhm.
that cannot feel very, very good. And it also kind of frees you from having to think that you do have to extend yourself more than what you actually want to do or maybe even capable of. Like, you don't have to white knuckle that. And so, like, it doesn't mean that you don't have that you can't be a part of it. It's just, how do I want to intentionally be a part of my partner's journey and vice versa?
Yeah, no, I love that because uh, something else that I had noted, but didn't I don't know if I
Mhm.
completely touched on it, but the oftentimes the activity that the person is bringing to the table is maybe not even necessarily a requirement to achieve the core or the underlying feeling that they're actually seeking. Not to say that it's not a way to get there or that they don't want to go and do that
Mhm.
activity, but that might not be the only way, right? Just to take it outside of sex and intimacy, if your goal is to go out and, let off a bunch of energy and have fun and sweat, like you could do that playing basketball, you could go
Mhm.
swimming, you could go run.
Yeah.
Like there's a million ways to achieve that. And so maybe if you don't like basketball, but we both enjoy tennis, well, we can go and do tennis together and I can meet maybe 70% of the feeling that I wanted to get out of playing basketball. And you and me can have a really great time and connect. And then I can also go play basketball and maybe I get a little more of that. But, there's often an underlying desire or feeling that we're seeking. And the activity that we come up with, whether it's, hot wifing, shibari,
Mhm.
BDSM kink, whatever it is often just a way to like get that feeling. So if we can talk about what are those feelings we're looking for, and then we can get creative about, well, okay, I'm not into that way to get it, but I could totally do it this way with you. And then if you want to go and get it that other way, great. But like I'm now not missing out on being a part of your core desires and your
Mhm.
core needs just because I don't want to do
Yeah.
basketball
Yeah.
or whatever.
I love that. So it's like shifting, like, okay, I know that they said that they love to do this. So there are other ways that you guys can intentionally engage in other parts that are just as fulfilling as if you went to go do this activity that you're not all that excited about, whether it is BDSM, whether it is Shibari, whether it is like, I don't want to do, I met you, I'm excited, let's go. Um, but maybe we can do other really
Yeah.
cool
Yeah.
adrenaline pumping things together or do other sexual, sensual things together that, like body paint or something else that I might be a little bit more excited about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's like right. Yeah, I'm not necessarily an exhibitionist who wants to go and have sex in front
Mhm,
of a whole
mhm.
club, but I'd love to be a part of painting you while you're
Yeah,
on
there you
display.
go.
You're now getting to do your
Mhm,
exhibitionist piece. I'm
mhm.
part of it, but I don't have to have sex in front of a room of people that I'm not comfortable.
Nice.
Like,
Yeah.
t- you know, does that take away your want and need to maybe go and have sex in front of a group of people? No, and you can still do that, but I can play in this feeling
Mhm.
with you in a way that also works for me.
It's very true. Very true. Yeah. So, like, just opening up the definition of what your perceived understanding of what sensuality or sexuality is, and also accessing other resources for what that expression of it could be. I love that idea.
Wow. Amazing. I love this conversation. I don't know, I love talking about all this stuff. If you hadn't figured that out. Okay.
Same.
I also had this image of if I'm just sitting here thinking like, oh geez, I hope I didn't confuse people and somebody like out there mixed up all my examples together and they're like, okay, so I'm tied up in shibari trying to play basketball and tennis while having sex and getting body painted.
Yes.
I think that's
I think that you've hit the dopamine lottery. That's what that sounds like to me.
and, yeah. And then go spend the next week in a coma as you recover.
I'd be overstimulated. Nobody touch me or talk to me. I need a week. Yes.
That's right. I need a week. Amazing. Well, any other final thoughts on this amazing question and conversation?
I think it's something that I'm also still trying to figure out what that looks like, that I think is a great undercurrent to this question, which is how do we begin to shift? And I think you talked about this as well. How do we begin to shift the view of having different paces and different sexual expressions from it being a place of lack to a place of like, I get to do this, or I'm excited to support you in this, or, I want to hear all about it, even if it's not the same thing, and not feel it as like, I'm not good enough, or it's a threat to the relationship, or that they're going to find that the grass is greener on the other side if they just live in this other space that they like. So I am not 100% sure how that changes. I know that it's a small thing, but I think it's something that we're probably all working at, which is changing our perspective and also the weeds in our garden, because a lot of the judginess on or shame around having different paces is from the idea of loss or the fear of being left behind, which isn't necessarily something we've put in our own love/sex gardens. I think those are weeds from societal conversations.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that this is a thing that you're sort of even for yourself figuring out, how do I do some of this, or how do I keep working on this? And I will throw a +1, a giant +1 behind that from my side, which is, it can be easy sometimes when you're talking about this for it to seem like easy peasy.
Yeah.
But, part of the reason that I talked at great length about this for as long as I did is because this is exactly the work that I'm figuring out how to do, myself and swimming, and personally is how do I be okay when you are different than me?
Yeah.
That we don't have to lose connection just because we're different. Because that's a really scary place for me to land.
Yeah.
So all these things that I'm telling you listeners was also telling me. I was telling myself.
Yes. Yeah. So those are my thoughts. I love that.
You all just heard my daily affirmations. I sit in the room and do this by myself.
I love this. Okay. This is a good one. We could probably keep going about this, honestly.
Oh, totally. 3 hours later, we're still going. It's a good thing we both have other calls we have to jump on shortly, because we'd be here till the sun goes down.
I agree.
Well, Meshai, I guess any final thoughts from your side today before we let you go, and knowing that we won't see you in March, perhaps, but we will see you soon.
Nothing much, but if you in the community have any ideas or thoughts, recommendations, things that you would like for us to kind of just delve into, feel free to drop them in. We will be checking. And we still, as always, love to hear from our community and address the little ponderings that we're all kind of having. And don't forget that we're all walking our own walks, so nothing you ask or suggest will probably be something that we're like, we've never thought of that or heard of it. So we're still processing through things too. So yeah.
Spot on. I love that. And final couple of thoughts from my side too would just be, I'm going to add a couple of links to the show notes. We talked about Emily Nagoski's work here a little bit, so I'll put a link to her website, and also a couple of interviews that I found really good that I've really enjoyed with her, where she, it's not quite the same as reading her book or diving all the way in, but you can get a lot from some of these podcast conversations that I've listened to with her. So I'll put a couple of links to those where she talks about these things in a really great way. So you can listen to it from the source rather than from the fin. We'll put those links in there for anybody who wants to find them. And links as well, Meshai, to where people can find you are in the show notes, and how they can reach out and work with you around coaching or any of this. And I suppose with that,
we will bid adieu.
I have nothing else to say on my side. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it has been amazing to sit here and be able to answer community questions month after month after month for a while, and be able to spend all that time with you as well, Fin. I've certainly enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to our next sit down.
Yeah, likewise. And thank you to everybody who's sent in questions, who's shared your vulnerable, struggles and things you're working on with us so we can talk about them and help others. So thank you for that. And thank you, Meshai, for coming in every month and sharing all of your wisdom and experience with us and with the community and listeners. So thank you.
Thank you for the invite, of course.
All right. We'll have a delightful day, and we'll talk soon. We'll see everybody when we get some more questions.
Okay. Bye. Have a good time, community, and we will see you guys soon. It's not goodbye forever, but it is a slower pace. We'll see you all soon.